this game.
Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, inspire, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
So come to you today after the Miami Heat lose 117-115 to the Indiana Pacers in a game that they had to have. No sugarcoating this. We're here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Also catch us on the podcast feed. We post these afterwards when we go live. This was the game for the regular season. It's not necessarily the game for the entire season, although it certainly makes it a lot harder. Miami Heat had a chance today to control their destiny. Take the tiebreaker over Indiana, move ahead of them, and also take a tiebreaker in the event of a tie between themselves, the Pacers, and the Sixers. They had this opportunity while knowing that the last 2 games of the year against Toronto, that they're going to Atlanta on Tuesday. All of those are winnable games. And really, it was just going to be about getting the Dallas game at home, and you were in good shape. Now everything is thrown up in the air. The Heat are looking more likely to be a play-in team than a playoff team right off the bat. We've seen other teams in the Eastern Conference like the Knicks, like Cleveland, Milwaukee, all fading recently. Opportunity to Miami to maybe even move a little bit higher than 6. That seems off the table at this point. And as we get to some of the specifics of this game, this is what occurs to me again in the wake of it. It's just a team where something is a little off and not quite good enough. And that's how it's felt the whole year. And they're probably going to end up right around the win total that I projected, which was 47. But the way that they've gotten there and these slow starts in games that they have to have, and that's really what sunk them today. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. The fact that it seems like 5 players on the roster showed up in some way and nobody else did. We'll talk about injuries that may have affected it. And certainly we will talk about some of the officiating late and some of Eric Spoelstra's decision-making. But it comes down to this. You can't go into Indiana, a place where this franchise has had trouble before, in a game that you absolutely know you have to have. It's not the second night of a back-to-back or anything like that. And you go in there and you get blitzed early again by TJ McConnell. I'm sorry, that just cannot happen. Not if you have championship aspirations. You can't be in a situation where the last time you faced TJ McConnell, he went 11 for 12. And today, before he missed a couple of shots late, he was 12 of 13. 23 of 25 by TJ McConnell. This is a guy who at age 32 is hanging on to the edge of the league. He's a good player. He's never been a full-time starter. He should not be someone you have to game plan for. We were talking about this on playback, and one of our guys who we greatly respect, who's in there all the time, and we appreciate this, is saying this is on Spo for not taking out TJ McConnell. What the F are we talking about? It's TJ McConnell. They did enough of a job on Halliburton. Siakam didn't get off on them. Miles Turner had a strong game. But, I mean, come on. Some of these back cuts that he was getting, these easy layups, I mean, just no force used defensively on him at all. That's not about the coach. That's about whether this team wants this enough, and ultimately, if they're well constructed enough, to win a game like this, that they should. And that's just where I start here. Is everything over? No. Obviously, we're going to all be despondent about this for the purposes of the team, because we want this to be as long a run as possible, and they keep making things harder on themselves. But this isn't about one shot or one Scott Foster decision or all the rest of this. Miami, if they are serious about contending for a championship, you go into Indiana and you get up 23-12 on that team and you don't look back. You don't spend the whole game fighting back. And we saw this against Philadelphia in the last game. They just got ahead quicker and then squandered it. But again, that was another awful defensive start against the Sixers. This team hangs its hat on defense. They did not defend well enough against a team that, yes, is a very good offensive team, but had things too damn easy. And that combined with the poor 3-point shooting early and no shows from a couple of different guys really killed him. I'll go to you on this, Greg, and then we'll get to the gamer of the night and all that. And we'll get to some comments. We want to let people vent. But people said they'd lose this game. And regardless of whether it was 2 points or 20 points, they lost the game. And so they didn't change any narratives today. And I thought they had a golden opportunity to do it.
Pat Riley has talked about that there's some of the time players, all the time players. And I think that applies to teams as well. And a full 48 minutes you did not get out of this team. They started out lackadaisical. They could not make shots early. You saw it. And so although it's not a crippling blow to the season, because literally last season we saw them do something in a similar scenario and make a run, who are we joking? Are we really going to set ourselves up for this again? I think it's a little bit ridiculous to have those type of expectations, and nothing in the data tells us that this team is ready to make that type of run. It's unfortunate. They made a valiant comeback today. They look like they gave a crap in the second half of the game, essentially. Ton in the fourth quarter. We're going to get into all the guys that made you almost had 5 guys score 20 and you lost tonight. But ultimately, this has been a team that has been not an all the time team. They're a some of the time team, and that's not good enough to win championships. And ultimately, I think that the fan base, they were hoping that they could just stay out of the play-in, and that would be a victory in itself, to not be considered one of those teams that has to fight for your life at the very end of the season. And instead, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to fight tooth and nail, and we'll see, because, you got tough games. Tough games happen late in the season in weird ways, right? So like this Atlanta game on the road, who knows how that goes? Then you got Toronto twice. They have a lot of incentive to lose, but you got to get those games. But the Indiana one, it feels really deflating that they got out of there with a loss.
We're going to get to the Rocky Sports Gamer of the Night in a second. And then again, we'll get to the comments and let Brady and Alex kind of break down what happened here. But just one more sort of overriding thought, okay? You said before the year, I'm not saying you, I'm saying the Heat, Eric Spoelstra, we believe we're one of those teams, okay? I don't think in Indiana they were thinking they were one of those teams. This is not like falling behind Milwaukee, which had expectations, or Boston, obviously, or even Philadelphia, although that happened now, even with Embiid missing 2 months. This Indiana team, they're in an early stage of a build. I said this yesterday on the podcast. Like, they're building around Tyrese Halliburton now. They picked up Siakam. That's their other piece. They kept Turner. Miami is supposed to be ahead of them right now. They are. Like, that. This is not, and honestly, they're supposed to be ahead of Orlando too. Okay. And that's the frustrating part of this. Like, it's one thing to say, okay, you're not at Boston's level. Jimmy maxed out. There's all kinds of conversations we can have about that kind of stuff, right? But Orlando and Indiana, no. I'm sorry. Like, you cannot end this season with a worse record than in spite of the injuries, because the Pacers dealt with things this year too, and they had to integrate a new player. And Orlando's young as hell, okay, and like should not be in a position where they're ahead of Miami right now, okay? And so I'm not going to make a lot of excuses based on the injuries and all this sort of stuff. They were healthy enough today. We'll talk about Rozier and what might have happened there. But this is a very frustrating loss, because everything that went against you this year, it was still there today. So I'm getting off my plane and I'm watching this thing on playback, and I'm like, do they care? Like, first quarter, do they care? Like, this is, we care. Do they care? And they did care, but you can't wait until the end of the first half to care. It's just not enough. All right, let's get to the Rocky Sports Gamer of the Night. One guy who actually did care.
And now on 5 on the Floor, it's time for the Gamer of the Night, sponsored by Rock Esports Center, the place to eat, drink, and play all day. Host your next birthday party with them. Located at 15305 South Dixie Highway in Palmetto Bay. They've got a 5,500 square foot state-of-the-art center equipped with all the high-end power. Play all day passes available for just $25, but if you mention 5 reasons, it's just $20. So mention 5 reasons or 5 RSN. You get to play all day for $20. And now, the Gamer of the Night.
I mean, to me, there's only one option. We can talk about the stats on some of the other guys. Jimmy Butler, 27, 7 and 8. Bam, 20, 12 and 3. Tyler, 21 points on 6 of 12 shooting, 3 threes, including a ridiculous shot at the end, which I'm sure we'll get to also. And Caleb Martin with his energy in 36 minutes, by the way, with 20 points on 8 of 10 shooting. It's Niko Jovic. And it's Niko Jovic because honestly, this game never gets back uh, into something respectable where they had a chance without him. We were saying like somebody else needs to show they give a damn here, and he was the guy. And not only that, but he brought the skill level along with it. And I'm beginning to think, and I've said this a few times now, Brady. I'm beginning to think that if this thing flames out in the first round against the Boston, against the Milwaukee, that the single best thing to come out of this season is they have another build around player because his development from beginning of the year when he was frustrated with his position being sent back and forth to Sioux Falls to he's on the not just making the run in the third but on the floor in the fourth making the inbounds passes.
Yeah.
I mean, he belongs. Like he belongs, and he cares. That is it's an underrated thing. He absolutely cares. You saw when Serbia lost in the in the World Championships this summer, and he was crying by the basket. Like this dude cares about the process and the results, and he was terrific today. They have no chance at the end without him.
I'm glad you mentioned the inbound because I think that summarizes this game well. Like the fact that you're putting this guy that was we talked about earlier, it was like funneling back between Sioux Falls and the team earlier in the season. And now you're in the biggest game of the regular season coming down to one final play and you put him as the inbound passer to not only just inbound it, like this isn't just like an inbound to the closest guy, throwing a cross court pass to drop it in the pocket in the weak side corner. Like the fact that they're putting him in that position just shows the game he had. And like you said, we're not talking about these late calls. We're not talking about the late Tyler shots if it wasn't for him. I thought Caleb cared in the first half. Talking about guys that cared. I thought he showed some heart in that first half. He was kind of one of the guys. But Jovic, I think it was 16 of his 18 points in the second half. Like the run in the third quarter where he hits a three, he pushes pace in a way, gets a transition layup, which is a thing you need. And as much as you say, okay, we have to slow down pace against a team that's pushing it like Indiana, like sometimes you've got to go with the flow a little bit. Like sometimes you have to play at the pace of the game. And that's what Niko does. Like he plays at that speed really well, got a transition bucket. And then he got a tough and one. And it was like, okay, wait, they're making a little run here. They could start to do some things. And even in the fourth quarter, there was a really tough, like leaning fadeaway corner three he had. And then he got fouled on another one. I don't really know the specifics of that one because that was a little of a horrible possession and he able to bail them out. But the fact that he's becoming a bailout option for them matters. And here's the biggest thing. Start the game. Halliburton absolutely picks on him. Like they come in this game saying, okay, we're going to pick on certain guys because that's what Indiana does best. They picked on him. They got him in isolation and he got him off his feet and Halliburton hit a really tough three to start the game. Like got him moving and it was like, okay, wait, this is what they're going to do. Look at the rest of the game. He's moving his feet. He's staying in front of him. He really shut down that option that they wanted to get to. Like he was not able to get comfortable pull-up threes on the ball. Like he really shut that part of it off. And the issue was, I feel like everybody off ball was sleeping, and it led to the McConnell off ball cuts, and it led to the Miles Turner wide open mid ranges or the wide open threes, and it's like that's the stuff that hurts. So I think 100% Niko deserves the credit for this game, even though he was one of the only the five that didn't have 20. It felt like his impact was everywhere. It's like I'm not looking forward because I know we're going to do a ton of podcasts on this of what to look forward to next. But like 100%, they're going to lean into this. Like there's certain moves he did. Like there was the one where he went kind of like over to the middle of the floor, took a bump and kind of threw up a floater in the middle of the floor. And it's like that's the type of stuff that they're going to get to later on. That's the type of stuff that they're going to spin back to and say, okay, we can get to this type of stuff on the ball. We can find him in these spots because look, we've seen players like him, have more usage and do stuff like that. And he's supposed to be in a winning team. He's supposed to be in this team that he's in lower usage. And now they're leaning on him a little bit more, but he deserves credit because like you said, he did care today.
Alex, I want to go to this before we get into more individual Heat players. Can you explain why they can't control TJ McConnell?
Oh
I always
man.
give you
Well,
the
I
hard.
mean,
I always give you the hard. I always give you the hardest question. So before we go much further, can you explain why it is that this guy, who legitimately does not do anything against anybody else these days, like I went back through the game logs. Why can they, other than his friendship with Jimmy? I have no idea. Why can they not control TJ McConnell?
I just think he's somebody that they're not particularly like, scouting for, right? I don't think he's the priority of anybody's scouting report. And I think tonight when he came in, it felt like for most of that stint that he got, he was facing the zone. And when you think of zoning, right, a lot of times you think about it like, oh, it's this guy is not a shooter. That's the type of guy you zone against, right? Wrong. TJ McConnell knows that outside of just making, open threes from after collapsing the zone, like the other way that you can score against the zone is to just get right into the middle there in that little pocket. And it felt like he was doing that over and over and over. He had one play in the first quarter where he just kind of cooked Tyler on an ISO. And I thought in general, like the defense overall was god awful, in that first half, specifically in the first quarter. And I once you let TJ McConnell get going like that ends up being the separator in this close game, because it wasn't a close game for most of the game, right? Like he were pretty much just trying to come back the whole time, but that factor ends up being the separator, because you end up looking at like both teams and what they shot from every spot on the floor. It was similar. Both teams ended up finishing with a similar offensive rating in the half court and overall. Like the Heat, turned up their offense a little bit in the second half after not being able to make a three the entire first half. And like that stretch where TJ McConnell, like in his stints, just kept getting whatever he wants. That was what separated this game. Like if you would have kept that in control a little bit, they probably would have won this game. They were able to come back from a game where it felt like they could have easily been down like 30, and it would have been one of those just like, oh, the game is over early type of games. They brought it all the way back. You give them, credit for that, but they put themselves in that position with bad defense. And we've talked about it for years on here. If their defense is not, like solid and well put together, they're not successful. Like that's just what it comes down to. That's, they had a really bad defensive first quarter, and the offense was awful too. But it's like usually the defense is there to help keep them in the game, and they hung around. But TJ McConnell is the difference between you being in the play-in or not.
Yeah, that and the loss to Washington. All right, we're gonna go to the play of the night here, and then we need to talk about Jimmy in a serious way here. So let's do this first.
And now it's time for the Insurance by Lynette Play of the Night, sponsored by InsuranceByLynette.com, an A-aggressive insurance agency. You can reach out to our friend Lynette at 954-581-8800. That's 954-581-8800, or InsuranceByLynette.com. That's InsuranceByLynette.com with 2 N's and 2 T's. Your best play for auto insurance, homeowners insurance, condo insurance, life insurance, or a retirement program. Reach out to Lynette at InsuranceByLynette.com.
All right, so what do we go with here? Do we want to be negative or positive? Because on the positive side, that hero shot, again, I feel like Tyler's made a lot of those over the past 5 years, and that's the reason to keep him in the game late, even though Indiana was hunting him constantly on the other end. To
Might need to be that fast break early. It might need to be that. Just that summarized the game of what went south.
All right, well, you would describe the fast break, because I have another one that I think had more importance, but this one might be more symbolic. So you go with the fast break, and then I'll get into the other one that might have actually cost them the game. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we've seen some bad transition plays this season from Miami, but like that might have been the worst one we've ever seen. Like Jimmy had an ability on a smaller defender to go up. He kind of draws in the defense. It's okay. It's a kick out, which we've seen hundreds of times in their transition offense. It's okay. No layup. We're going to kick it out. Tyler passes up the 3 to pass it to Terry. Terry passes up the 3 to pass it back to Tyler. Then Tyler like throws a pass that I don't know where, and it just passes it right to the defense. And it's like, you cannot give up opportunities like that in games like this against a defense like this. Like this is not a team you should be rushing against with that type of defense. You should be able to score on them set wise when you slow it down. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like that play just summarizes things, because those are the plays you have to cut out in big games. That's the plays that they cut out in last year's playoffs. Like they did this type of stuff last year in the regular season. They've had bad shooting games. They had bad, transition games. They've had bad of all that. But in the playoffs, we did not see a lot of that. Their transition stuff was fixed. We saw the outlet passes. We saw everything come around. In big games, that stuff can't happen. I don't know. That play kind of just stuck with me.
You know where the transition stuff plays in here is teams are good in transition when the players have a feel for each other. Because so much of it is reacting to how many defenders get back, where they're going to be, what the spacing is on the floor, right? And as I'm watching, we probably should do podcasts about this, but as I'm watching LeBron talk to Reddick on the third podcast, which was a lot about the Heat, and he was talking about Spo coming back and coming up with this plan in transition about how the bigs were never going to run down the middle of the floor, that they blocked that off, that they were going to space it. I didn't notice it at the time while I was covering those teams, but essentially he was creating space for them to operate. And Bron and Dwayne had this symbiotic thing where they could play off of each other and they could react to anything. That's transition basketball. Like that is where that comes in. And thank you, Rob, for the comment. And we'll get to Jimmy here in a second. So I have that one in the holster, Alex. But basically, like this team, they don't have any instincts to play together in those situations. And I don't, in some of these cases, they should because they play together enough over the last 5 years. And in some cases, it's like there's rust because they haven't been out there on the floor enough this year. But they don't have that kind of, again, there are rare exceptions, but Golden State was all read and react during that period of time, right? It's Steph and Clay, they know how to play off of each other in these situations. Heat players look lost. Brady just described it. But to me, the play of the day was we always talk about Spo saving his challenges. And he burned one with about 2.5 left, right? A little over that, because on a play that honestly I thought Jimmy was right to ask him to challenge it, but they didn't get it. And then Bam had a clean strip in the last minute, which could have changed everything. And he didn't have the challenge to use. Alex, I'll go to you on this, and then I want to talk Jimmy here a little bit. How do you think Spo should use his challenges? It's a question we don't talk about a lot, but he clearly has a philosophy. He hates it, by the way, hates it. Okay, like he doesn't like the one challenge system. He's never been a guy who's been in favor of what the league put in here. But like, when is the point you use it? Like, would you have used it on the one that Jimmy asked for, or would you kept it in your back pocket? Like, what do you do there?
Honestly, I'm going to disappoint people with this answer because I'm not really particularly opinionated on it. Like, just like anything else, it's a tough decision. Like, I know it's a cop-out answer. It's just like, do you use it now when your superstar is demanding you do it and you're not sure you're going to have another opportunity to do it? And, you're coming back in this game. You're trying to keep hold of the momentum. Like, it's not a science, right? It's not an exact science. So it's tough. And like you said, Spo is not one to do that typically. And now I'm not sure we'll ever see him do it again, right? After, like, in such an important game, it goes for him the other way. Like, it was just, it was a tough result, man. It ended up being a foul. I mean, they got like the hand on the ball, and I get why there was frustration, but you already know, like, them seeing just that little bit of contact that there was is going to be enough for them to not overturn it. And that ends up like being just a huge factor into what, happens with this season. It's unfortunate, man. And, like you said, Jimmy was begging for it. Jimmy had an okay game today. Could have done more, I think, but in general, like, it wasn't his fault today. It wasn't because he didn't come out, right? And when you look at the calls, right, like the controversial calls in this game, when you look at the amount of times they missed at the rim, like those are the types of things that, like, just can swing a game. Like, they end up shooting 12 of 26 at the rim. You shoot 46% at the rim. Against a team that is known for not good defense, playing fast pace. It's supposed to be like a softer defensive team. And it's like all these other things are getting in the way of, your playoff run. And now it's, oh man, this call changed everything. I mean, you shouldn't have got there in the first place. It shouldn't have been, in that situation in the first place. You got to make some of these bunnies. You got to play defense, and you probably are just in a way better position if you're not climbing back from however much it was, right? Like, they were down 20 something early in that game. And, shout out to them for coming back, right? But it just wasn't. And yeah, like, I don't know that challenge ended up making all the difference, but it was really important.
All right, we're going to talk Jimmy here in a second, but Greg, I just want to go through. They got no shows from some guys today. And I always bring it back to Jimmy and Bam because that's the build, primarily Jimmy. So I do, before we end this, I want to I want to dive into this, but I mean, Duncan is not healthy. It's obvious. 0 for 4 from 3 in the starting lineup. I said before the game on our off the floor, make sure you guys subscribe to this. $2.99 per month, but more Heat content than anywhere else. That there would be a short leash today if he didn't play well, and he
Mhm.
didn't. And so Spo did not go back to him, except for that last possession. He had him out there. I wonder what would have happened if the ball had actually found him after that long out. Kevin Love only 7 minutes today. He's been really good lately, but Jovic actually earned those backup 5 minutes, and so I was okay with Spo going back to Jovic. Jaquez today really non-factor. I didn't think he was great defensively either. 13 minutes, 1 of 2 from the floor.
It's a shame.
Highsmith, who's been huge for them lately, just had 1 3-point attempt, scoreless in 19 minutes. So I mean, you got a whole lot of nothing out of those four. And one other guy, Terry Rozier, who we'll talk about a little later, but played only 22 minutes, was questionable with a neck injury that popped up late on the injury report. Ended up not playing at the end of the game. I'm sure we'll get a report on him, but didn't appear to be related to the knee that he knocked in the last game with Lowry, but only played 22 minutes. But again, we can talk about all those guys, but they got enough from Caleb. They got enough from Tyler in some situations, even with him getting hunted. Bam, I didn't think it was his best game. Too much hesitation on offense, and defensively didn't have his usual impact. Seemed frustrated having to chase Miles Turner out to the 3-point line.
Inefficient.
But inefficient. But it comes back to Jimmy here. And look, Jimmy's line overall 27, 7, 8, 7 of 16 from the floor, including 1 of 3 from 3, 39 minutes. He's played 39 or more minutes in each of the last 3 games. So Spo has been hiking his minutes. But he's not getting the same calls. And it clearly affected him today.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's the
He was
pump
frustrated.
faking or right. So I mean, if he's not getting those calls, is this like the best that we can expect? Because there was one time he blatantly didn't get a call, and then he kind of just threw the ball up the second time, like knowing there would be a makeup call. So like, there's some respect from the officials, at least enough to give him a makeup call. But I've never seen him in his head like this about the officiating. Like, he had the palms up today. Like, that's
Yeah,
LeBron.
that's
You don't
true.
usually see that from Jimmy.
He makes no excuses, but tonight he just couldn't, I guess, hold back in certain points. And it's a tough game. He's been officiated in a weird way since after the All-Star break. I would also point out he only had 1 steal tonight. So although he filled up the stat sheet, there's certain indicators of when you really know Jimmy is doing the Jimmy things. And that's like a 3 or 4 steal game, not a 1 steal game. And I know I'm using counting stats. Bear with me. I think that if they're going to be in a situation where the officials don't give them the benefit of the doubt on calls, Jimmy has to do what he did in the second half for 48 minutes. I'm coming back to this because he got to the line plenty by the end of the game. What was it? Did he get to the line 12 times? That's more than enough. It's just, I mean, he's still in the top 5 in the league as a free throw shooter with attempts. So like, ultimately he got there enough. It's just getting there throughout the entire game. And it's such a big part of Jimmy's game that if he is going to be officiated differently, it impacts him in ways that other guys who can just go to their 3-point shooting, despite what the percentages and Jimmy might say, it's just not his game.
Brady, you've made that point too, that he gets rhythm off of the free throws, right?
100%.
So how does he get the rhythm? How does he get the rhythm otherwise?
I thought it was interesting. The first time that Spo talked about it, he said, well, it's time. Like, he was like, Jimmy has to make an adjustment. Like, it's time for him to make an adjustment. It's probably the first thing he has to do is just click into scoring mode immediately, because he goes into this mode. His first mode is the free throw thing. It's I'm going to just run into people. He says that quote all the time. I like to just run into people. But now you can't run into people when you're not getting the effects of running into people. Like, it hits a certain point. So like, what is the case? I mean, I think he has to cut down. I hate to say he has to cut down the threes, but it's like, I think he has to get back to his mid-range game a little bit. And I think he has to get back to his mid-post game a little bit. I think he has to get back to the back to the basket. After that Jovic run we talked about earlier, The shot that forced them to call timeout and it cut it to like 9, I think at that point, was that Jimmy turnaround. Like he just, okay, I have a smaller guy on my back. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to just get to my game and I'm going to get a turnaround jumper. And then from there, when they start overplaying it, now all of a sudden he can do his thing where he does his little shimmy move and he can do all the other stuff getting to the basket. And then maybe then it'll start to come. But that's the key, because he gets his flow from that other stuff and he's not getting to that other stuff right now. And I don't want to say, because he did get the bare numbers to start this game. Like even he had like 10 points pretty early on. Like he was getting scores. The first point of the game was a back screen that he got a layup off of. So I don't want to say it like that. But it's 100%. That's the one thing. It's not the body language. None of that worries me. Like none of that part of it worries me about Jimmy's game moving forward. The one thing that legitimately is something to worry about is the calls, is the free throw thing, because that's a main part of his game. And Ethan, we talked about it before. Like as much as Greg's talking about like the steals is shows how much he's into the game. The more he starts taking these nonchalant threes, kind of shows you how much he's kind of out of the game, and you just don't want him hitting that point, especially at this point in the season. You don't want it to be in a playing game or a playoff game, and he starts taking these nonchalant threes consistently because he's like, okay, I'm not getting the calls anyway, so let me just take these. And it's like, that's gonna hurt the offense. That's gonna be a problem. So he's just got to just keep attacking, and I think just hit scoring mode a little more often and try to work that mid range.
See, I don't think he's a foul baiter. Like he's not a foul baiter like Harden or one of these guys, or MB, but he is a little bit of a foul hunter. I don't. There's a distinction there. Like he's, like you said, Brady, he's looking for contact because he feeds off the contact, and then obviously that's where he gets the 3-point plays that I think are more valuable for this team, the ones at the basket, not the ones behind the arc. And but it is the first time in a while I've really seen him get frustrated. It did seem like it got him going a bit. And I hate the fact that there needs to be some enemy for Jimmy to like lock in. Like that's the thing. Like he wasn't bad today. I'm not saying he was bad. I keep saying that their star needs to be a star, and I don't know if they have a 1A anymore. But he was good enough to win against this team, because I'm just gonna keep coming up to this. This is not. These are not the Pacers of Hibbert, George, Granger, George Hill, Lance Stevenson. Okay, that group. Okay, that the big three went in and beat. This is a team that the Heat are supposed to be ahead of in the pecking order at this time. They should not have been chasing them in the first place, and they should definitely not be chasing them now. And I just, that's why it's like I defensively, like. And then there was the other play too, and we'll get to the injury report now right after this, but there was the other play too where Jimmy just got totally turned around by Aaron Nesmith. And then again, Bam was late chasing it down, and so there ended up being the foul at the end of that play. But you mentioned the steals, Greg. Like, okay, it's not just steals, but it's deflections. It's just activity. It's physicality defensively. Jimmy came in this league as a defensive player. And when he is playing well on that end, they all feed off of it. And it's just a big part of it. And I thought Caleb's physicality on defense was better than Jimmy's today. And that should not necessarily be the case. All right, let's get to the injury report. One guy we haven't talked about a lot. We'll get into it here.
And now it's time for the official 5 on the Floor injury report, sponsored by our friend Eric Rubenstein, the personal injury attorney. Born and raised in Lauderdale, Florida, lives in Miami, went to St. Thomas. He's a South Florida guy and a huge Miami Heat fan. But the important thing is he can help you get your money that you deserve when something happens to you. So reach out to our guy, Eric Rubenstein. Again, ericrubenstein.com, or ask about me, I got you, on Instagram. And now, the injury report.
All right, we do these live shows kind of on the fly here, and I've been looking for some kind of report. Did Spoelstra address, because he should have talked by now? They're staying in Indiana tonight, by the way. They're flying to Atlanta tomorrow morning. That's what I'd seen on the itinerary here. Has there been anything said about Rozier and what? I mean, was it just ineffectiveness that he only played 22 minutes today, or again, was there anything related to the knee or the neck that Spo mentioned? Greg, do you see anything on there?
No, there's been no mention. It's just neck stiffness was what was initially reported. So I'm guessing that maybe flared up. mid-game because there's no other reason why he wouldn't play. Obviously, he could have also been nursing that knee a little bit that's been a little sore, but this could just be that neck stiffened up on him and he couldn't give it a go further.
All right. So how much difference do we think it made? Alex, what do you think?
It's hard to tell, man. It's hard to speculate on something like that. It's tough. The one thing we haven't mentioned, I'm not trying to make it like an excuse for how they perform, nothing like that. 3 games in 4 nights is not nothing. He had the knee thing the other day that you mentioned, and then now with the neck thing, like it is a lot happening at a time. And then I think all just kind of, came together, or I should say came apart in that first half. Like he couldn't buy a bucket. Same thing with Duncan, who just hasn't really looked the same since he got back from injury. Like I think he showed some stuff as the game went on in the Rockets game. He showed a little bit there, and I was thinking, maybe this is the beginning of him getting back to normal. Completely went the other way again tonight, and just like with your starting backcourt playing that poorly, like it's one thing for them to not shoot well, but it was more than that. Like both of them were playing really, really poorly, and Tyler had a rough start too, and then ended up having a decent game and making a lot of clutch plays down the stretch, all that. But like, man, that your backcourt really, to start that game laid an egg. And I think that was, probably and also just on the defensive end, they were not great either. And that's me being generous because I don't want to just blame it all on them. But yeah, the backcourt was a huge part of why they got to that start in that game.
Brady, would you sit Duncan? Let's assume Terry's back in Atlanta, which is, we can't assume. I don't know again how serious this is, but is this the time to just put Tyler back in and we're just going to abandon all the arguments we've been making here for the past couple of months because Duncan this is now what, 5 straight subpar games for him. This might have been the worst.
The solution's always the unseen. The solution is
Right.
always the unseen. Tyler was the problem. Duncan's now the problem. There's always a problem. But I do think there is something at this point in the season when we're sitting here and having these arguments about they have a 10-man rotation and they're probably going to have to shrink it to 9. You have to eventually play your best guys. Like every time a guy goes down, they do play better. And every time they play with all their best guys, it usually does look worse, but it does hit a certain point where they just have to figure it out. They can't just keep having these things where it's like, okay, you can play with this guy, but you can play with this guy. Like, no, it's at the point of the season, like great teams or even good teams just have to figure it out. They have to just be able to play together at this point in the season. So, I mean, they can do the thing, but the fact that Tyler just got Tyler to buy into the bench thing and had this thing, and now they're like, all right, Tyler, just get promoted again because Duncan just had no for 4 night. I can't see it. I don't think they do it yet. If maybe down the line, close to a play-in playoff thing, maybe if Duncan's still at that point. But if they're going to sit him, I don't think they're going to bench him. I think they'll sit him, and he's not going to play at all. Like I'm saying, like I think he'd be ruled out. But that's injury.
What I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I think might happen because I do think that I do think that once you go to Tyler as a starter again, you can't go back. So that's right. I mean, you really can't go back like that. Then you're going to put him in the starting lineup. So it kind of feels like if you're thinking about it anyway, and we saw what Tyler did late in this game, there was the one most promising play of the whole game was Jimmy setting up Tyler for that 3. I was like, oh my God, the two of them look like they've actually played together before. And Tyler made the 3. Like I kind of feel like, I mean, Duncan's just, okay, we're going to give him a night to rest, right? And it's a back-to-back with the Dallas game. So you could rest him in Atlanta, get him another day's rest. You put Tyler in the starting lineup, and boom, we're right back where we were. And then, if Duncan's healthy enough on Wednesday, then you bring him back off the bench and you see if you get a spark. We're playing musical chairs here at this point, but
the answer is simple, Ethan. The answer is simple. You bench whoever's not playing well as of late, and you play and you start whoever did play well, and you just keep scrambling back and forth. It's a life.
I think they say whoever has the worst plus minus. Just whoever has the worst plus minus in the game before.
All right, now you guys are just frustrated going at me. But I'm saying it's not about that. It's about the guy doesn't look healthy. Like you have an excuse.
That's where I'm at.
The guy does not look healthy. Like he just doesn't look. I mean, we can't sit here and praise Duncan the way we've praised him the whole year. about all these elements he's added to his game in addition to the shooting, and that he was their most consistent, reliable player, and then look at the slop he's put out for the last 5 games and say that's the same guy physically. It's just not like he didn't regress. Like he didn't, right? He's not,
It's concerning.
right? He doesn't look right. He just doesn't look right. Like and this again goes counter to everything we always say about the Heat are keeping their players out too long. Maybe this is one that they put out there too quickly, or he wanted to be out there too quickly, or maybe it's just bad luck and he's just not as healthy as they thought he was. But it's just this is not. I don't think this is just him losing his confidence. He looks like he's not running as much.
I mean, the
right?
things he was
Like,
doing at the beginning of the season was like the cutting and the stuff around the rim and the
all
high pick and
stopped.
roll. He's not even getting he's not running on ball actions. Like the closest thing to an on ball action is him coming off a handoff. Like there's not really the 2-on-1 scenarios where he's getting in the lane and the runners and everything like that. That was the stuff we were praising and talking about at the time. So that's why he 100% doesn't look healthy. And it even, I'm not saying this guy is a lockdown defender or anything, but there were points this season where he was defending pretty decent. Like he was able to kind of hold his own out there, especially off the ball and on the ball, on switches, he was able to hold his own. He just looks stiff. He looks just very stiff and out of place right now. And it's also tough for a guy because back injuries are weird. When a guy, he said before, like he's never had a back injury. Like he doesn't have a history of a back injury. So this is like new to him. So I agree. If there was anything to do, it would be sitting him completely. But in terms of like the benching thing, that I don't really stand in that direction.
I'll all right. Last, I'll throw this back at you because I give Alex all the tough questions supposedly. If you're gonna sit him for a night, do you put Tyler in the starting lineup knowing that you can't go back, or do you throw Patty Mills out there?
These are grown men. Like, what are we doing? Like there's we're gonna just because it's a game. Like we had you stay in your role. We're gonna put the guy in the 15th. No, he can
The
start
Patty
for a
Mills
night and go
revenge
back.
game. You know what? Either the Patty Mills or DeLon Wright revenge games against Atlanta. Like you could get they both played for Atlanta.
Tyler.
Just start the Patty DeLon backcourt. You know what I'm saying? Like at least these two guys are fighting for their NBA careers.
Oh, this loss hurt you bad.
Yeah, if our best players can't play together, we got bigger problems.
Jamal Cade, get him out there. Cole Swider, how's he doing? Orlando Robinson, is he healthy? All right. The Heat lose, but as we close this, and we thank everybody for participating, and especially for the super chat contributions, always appreciated. And those comments as well. Also, check out Off the Floor. Alex always puts that up there so I don't forget. Make sure you subscribe, $2.99 per month. Link is right here, and we will be going no matter how long this season goes. By the way, I don't want to jinx it. Should I jinx it? Should I say what the Sixers score is? Or I can't hope traffic anymore. Greg, do you want to say what the Sixers score is?
I'll do that because I always.
I know, but I don't want to say it because I'll be blamed for jinxing it. You ready?
They're down 10 at halftime. I got us.
Down 10. Thank you. I mean, I still wouldn't rather be the Sixers.
I would. Have a good night, everybody.